It was supposed to be a regular Tuesday morning. The kids were at school, and Daniel Carter, a respected cardiac surgeon, was gathering laundry before heading to the hospital. As he opened the closet to grab his wife's clothes for dry cleaning, something caught his eye: Melissa's gym bag, oddly tucked behind his neatly lined shoes. Curious, he pulled it out and found her white blouse from the previous night. The moment he picked it up, his stomach twisted. It wasn't the faint scent of her usual perfume. It was something unfamiliar, more provocative, mixed with the unmistakable stain of deep crimson lipstick on the collar. Daniel froze, the shirt hanging from his trembling fingers. Melissa had told him she was at a late business meeting, helping coordinate a charity event for her firm. But no charity event left lipstick on a collar like that. No client dinner explained the perfume that didn't belong to her. For a moment, he tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just an accident, maybe someone hugged her at the event. But deep down, something shifted inside him, a sharp, cold instinct that pierced through the trust they'd built over 15 years of marriage. He sat in the corner of their walk-in closet, gripping the blouse, trying to suppress the flood of thoughts crashing into his mind. Melissa, his wife, his partner, the mother of his 3 children, had always seemed so devoted, so poised. But now, every late meeting, every last-minute errand, every excuse she'd given him began to echo. With suspicion, still he said nothing. That night, when she came home smiling, kissed him softly, and poured wine like nothing had happened, he played along. He asked her casually how the event had gone. She smiled, told him it was exhausting but productive. She didn't flinch, didn't miss a beat. But Daniel's eyes never left her lips, the very lips that had touched another man just hours earlier. He barely slept that night, haunted by the image of her blouse and the scent that still lingered on his fingers. He stared at the ceiling, knowing the woman beside him in bed was already somewhere else, mentally, emotionally, physically. And for the first time in 15 years, Daniel Carter felt like a stranger in his own home, holding on to the pieces of a life that was quietly unraveling thread by thread. But he wouldn't confront her. Not yet. Because if Melissa had turned their love into a lie, then he would quietly prepare for the truth. And when it came time, it wouldn't be just a confrontation. It would be an awakening. The lipstick stain was just the beginning. What came next stripped away every illusion Daniel Carter had clung to. 2 days after discovering Melissa's blouse, he received a message from his longtime friend and colleague Eric, a casual text that would crack everything wide open. Hey, man, weird question. Was Melissa in Midtown on Thursday night? I thought I saw her at Del Mar's rooftop lounge. Didn't think she was the type for that scene. Daniel's heart skipped. Del Mar's was a sleek, upscale lounge, not the kind of place Melissa ever mentioned. She'd told him she had a client dinner that evening. Calmly, he replied, "Nope, she had a work event on the West Side." Eric's next message hit harder. Maybe I was wrong. But she was with someone, not sure who. Looked cozy, tall guy, dark suit. Didn't look like work. Daniel sat motionless, the phone heavy in his hand. Cozy. Not business. Something was happening behind his back, and the lipstick was no accident. It was a warning sign he hadn't been ready to face. That night, when Melissa returned home, laughing, as she recounted a completely fabricated story about her client dinner, Daniel watched her more closely than ever. Every word she spoke felt rehearsed, every smile, every touch, a performance. He wanted to believe he was wrong, that it was just paranoia, but her eyes gave her away. She used to look at him with warmth. Now there was distance, like she was always somewhere else. Unable to sleep, Daniel logged into their shared bank account. Melissa had handled most of their day-to-day finances. He trusted her implicitly. But the transactions told a different story. Expensive dinners, charges from luxury boutiques, and most glaring, a 2-night stay at a boutique hotel. Downtown on the same dates Melissa claimed to be at her sister's. His blood ran cold. Melissa wasn't just having an affair. She was funding it with their money, hiding it under his nose. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was methodical. The next morning, Daniel stood in the bathroom brushing his teeth, staring at his own reflection. The man looking back at him wasn't weak. He was a husband, a father, a provider, and now, a man with a storm rising inside him. Melissa had no idea he knew. No idea he was already collecting the pieces of her deception. Let her keep lying, he thought, because when the truth comes crashing down, it won't just shake her world. It will destroy everything she built on betrayal. Daniel didn't sleep that night. His mind raced through every detail, every excuse Melissa had ever given him. Something inside him had snapped, not from rage, but from clarity. He needed answers, not assumptions, not gut feelings, proof. The next morning, after he dropped the kids off at school, Daniel drove straight to a private investigator's office. He didn't hesitate. "I need surveillance on my wife," he said plainly, sliding a photo of Melissa across the table. "I don't care how painful the truth is. I just want it all." Within 72 hours, the first report came in. Melissa had told him she'd be in meetings all afternoon. Yet the photos showed her slipping into a hotel at 1:07 p.m. with the same man Eric had mentioned. Same man from the boutique charges. Same man from the lies. His name was Brandon Hale, Melissa's co-worker, recently divorced, known for his charm and his disregard for boundaries. Daniel stared at the photos in disbelief. Melissa wasn't resisting temptation. She was sprinting into it. She wasn't a woman caught in a moment of weakness. She was orchestrating a double life. That night, she returned home humming softly, kissed him on the cheek, and asked how his day had been. He watched her as if seeing her for the first time. The woman standing in their kitchen was no longer his wife. She was a stranger in familiar skin. Later, as she showered, Daniel unlocked her laptop. He knew her passwords. She never thought she needed to hide anything from him. But her email inbox revealed everything. Hundreds of messages with Brandon, photos, dinner reservations, plans for a weekend getaway. One email caught his eye. A complaint about how suffocating life with Daniel had become. A hint at why she'd strayed. And then came the final blow. A draft email, unsent but saved, titled Custody Strategy. In it, Melissa outlined a plan to subtly position Daniel as emotionally unstable during their eventual divorce. She was planning to take the kids. His hands trembled, but not from fear, from fury. She wasn't just cheating. She was preparing to destroy him, to paint him as a villain while playing the victim. But she underestimated him. Daniel closed the laptop slowly and stood in the dim hallway, staring into the shadows of their home. She thought he'd break. She thought he'd beg. But she was wrong. He wasn't going to fall apart. He was going to fight back harder than she ever imagined. And when he was done, she wouldn't just lose him. She'd lose everything she tried to steal. Daniel spent the next few days carefully masking his knowledge. He played the devoted husband while inside. Every smile Melissa gave him felt like a dagger. But he wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. He needed more than proof. He needed leverage. He met again with the private investigator. "Keep tracking. Them," Daniel instructed, his voice low and controlled. "I want to know everything. Where they go, what they say, what she's planning next." Each night, while Melissa curled up beside him like nothing was wrong, Daniel lay awake reviewing new evidence. Hotel receipts, voice recordings, phone logs. She was still seeing Brandon 3 to 4 times a week, slipping away in the middle of the day or staying late at the office with fake excuses. And then came the final confirmation, photos of Melissa and Brandon kissing in his car, parked less than 3 blocks from their children's school. That was the breaking point. Daniel felt something inside him go cold. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the carelessness, The audacity. She wasn't just cheating on her husband, she was gambling with the stability of their children's lives, their home, everything he'd built. That night, Melissa tried to initiate intimacy. Soft kisses, whispers against his skin. Daniel played along, but his mind wasn't with her. He was counting down the days, watching her, memorizing every lie she told. Every "I love you" sounded emptier than the last. When she fell asleep, Daniel slipped out of bed and opened his hidden folder. Inside were documents his lawyer had prepared: divorce petitions, asset protection agreements, full custody motions. He wasn't going to let Melissa blindside him. He was going to hit first, and hit hard. The next morning, he scheduled a quiet meeting with his attorney. "We're filing next week," he said firmly. "But I don't want just a divorce. I want custody of my kids, and I want her to feel every ounce of the damage she's done." His lawyer reviewed the evidence and nodded. "You're in a strong position, Daniel. With everything we have, the court will see her for who she really is." As Daniel walked back to his car, a strange calm settled over him. He was no longer the man drowning in betrayal. He was a man with a plan. And when Melissa finally learned what he knew, it wouldn't be through yelling or revenge. It would be through silence, strategy, and precision. She had torn their family apart in secret, but he would rebuild it in the open, without her. Daniel's decision was final. There was no going back. But to make Melissa feel the full weight of her betrayal, he knew he had to hit her where it hurt most: her sense of control. He began preparing, quietly, methodically. He contacted the bank and shifted funds into a separate account under his name only. He canceled their joint credit cards and issued a new one with limited access, just enough so Melissa wouldn't notice the change right away. He refinanced the house in his name, leveraging the prenuptial agreement they had signed years earlier, one she had forgotten even existed. At home, he remained calm, affectionate even. He cooked dinner, played with the kids, kissed Melissa goodnight. She didn't suspect a thing, but every time she smiled at him with those deceitful eyes, every time she lied so easily, something darker brewed inside him. He wasn't the naive husband anymore. He was a man sharpening the knife behind the curtain. Then, one evening, it happened. Daniel walked into the house earlier than usual. He heard Melissa in the living room, talking on the phone, her voice soft, flirtatious, giggling like a teenager. He stood silently by the door, listening. "You were incredible today," she whispered. "I can still feel you on my skin." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I wish I could see you again tonight, but I need to play nice with Daniel a little longer. He's still so clueless." That was it. He didn't confront her right then. He didn't shout or accuse. He simply walked into the room, smiled like he hadn't heard a word, and handed her the cup of tea he'd made. "Long day?" he asked, his voice steady. She froze for a moment, then nodded with a fake smile. "Yeah, just catching up with a friend." He nodded back. "I bet." The next morning, he met with his attorney and handed over the last piece of evidence, the phone call he had secretly recorded. It would be the nail in the coffin. "We file next week," Daniel said. "And I want full custody. She doesn't deserve another chance to lie her way through motherhood." That night, as Melissa slipped into bed beside him, unaware of what was coming, Daniel lay in silence, eyes wide open, heart steel cold. She thought she was in control. She had no idea her perfect little lie was already collapsing beneath her feet. And Daniel? He wasn't broken anymore. He was ready. Daniel sat in his car, staring at the thick envelope in his hands. Inside were the finalized divorce papers and the custody petition. His lawyer had done exactly what he asked: airtight, brutal, and irrevocable. He was ready to serve them, but not just yet. First, he wanted Melissa to see the full scope of what she'd lost. At home, she was in the kitchen, humming a tune, flipping pancakes for the kids as if she were still the perfect mother and wife. She greeted him with a kiss on the cheek, as if her betrayal hadn't already shattered everything. He smiled, kissed her back, and helped set the table. It was surreal. Two actors in a play, except only one of them knew how it ended. Later that evening, when the kids were asleep, Melissa curled up next to him on the couch and handed him a glass of wine. Her tone was light, flirty. "You've been so sweet lately," she said, tracing her fingers along his arm. "It's like we're falling in love all over again." Daniel's smile never wavered. "Maybe we are," he said softly. Inside, he was boiling. The next day, he received a call from his private investigator. "You're going to want to see this," the voice said. A new video, Melissa and Brandon, sneaking into a boutique hotel in Midtown, her hands all over him, her face glowing in a way she hadn't looked around Daniel in years. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago, right after she had told Daniel she was attending a book club. He downloaded the footage and added it to the folder he kept locked on his computer. Evidence, proof, insurance. That evening, he invited Melissa to dinner at their favorite restaurant, the same place he'd proposed years ago. She seemed thrilled, completely unaware of what was coming. Under the dim lights, with soft jazz playing in the background, Daniel poured her a glass of wine. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he said. Her eyes sparkled. "Me too. I think we're really reconnecting." He slid a small envelope across the table. "What's this?" she asked, curious. "Everything," he said calmly. "Read it." As her eyes scanned the first page, her smile faded. Her fingers began to tremble. "Daniel, what is this?" "Divorce," he said, his voice calm but cutting. "Custody, financial separation, full disclosure of your affair, and evidence. Lots of it." Melissa looked up, eyes wide in disbelief. "I was never clueless," he said quietly. "I was patient." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked at her one last time. "You destroyed our family. Now I'm taking it back." Then he walked, away, leaving her stunned, alone, and finally exposed to the consequences of her deception. Melissa sat on the edge of their bed, hands shaking, eyes red from hours of crying. The divorce papers had hit her like a thunderclap, but it was the custody petition that broke her. She never thought Daniel would go that far. She had underestimated him, thought he would rage, argue, then eventually forgive. But he hadn't. He was ice, cold, calculated, and she had no idea how to thaw him. That evening, she waited for him in the living room, rehearsing her plea over and over. When Daniel walked through the door, she stood up quickly, desperate to close the widening gap between them. "Daniel, please," she started, voice trembling. "We can fix this. I made a mistake, but we're a family." Daniel didn't stop, walking. He set his keys down, took off his coat, and stared at her. Blank. Unreadable. "You made several mistakes," he replied calmly. "And none of them included thinking about our children." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." "But you did," he cut in sharply. "You hurt me. You lied. You turned our home into a theater for your little affair." "I ended it," she whispered. "I chose us." "No," he said, his voice steady. "You only tried to choose us when you realized you were losing everything." Melissa stepped closer, reaching for his hand. "I still love you." Daniel stepped back. "You love convenience," he replied. "You love safety. You love the version of me who didn't know better." Her voice cracked. "I can change." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Change doesn't undo betrayal." He turned toward the stairs but paused. "I want you out by Friday. I've arranged a temporary rental for you. You'll have visitation on weekends, supervised." "Supervised?" she gasped. Daniel looked over his shoulder. "I don't trust you. Not as a mother, not as a wife. Not anymore. She collapsed, onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel watched for a moment. A part of him ached. This was the woman he once built dreams with. But those dreams had been burned to ashes the moment she crossed a line she couldn't uncross. He headed upstairs, where their children were already asleep. He leaned in and kissed each of them on the forehead. They were the only part of that. Marriage worth saving. And now he was determined to protect them, with every ounce of strength he had left. Melissa was unraveling. The mask she wore for years, of a devoted wife, a loving mother, was slipping, and she knew it. Since the day Daniel handed her the divorce papers and walked away from the table without a glance back, nothing in her world had felt stable. She had tried every trick, tears, apologies, empty promises, but none of it worked on him. He wasn't angry anymore. That's what terrified her the most. He was calm, focused. That meant he had already moved on. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. Her lover Brandon had gone quiet too, refusing to answer her calls now that the affair had become a liability. He wanted no part of the fallout. He had used her for thrills, for sex, for escapism. Now that everything was burning, he vanished, leaving her to face the wreckage alone. Desperate, she reached out to Daniel again. She showed up at his office unannounced, eyes swollen from crying. He looked up from his desk, clearly irritated. "Melissa," he said coldly, "this isn't the place." "I just need 5 minutes," she pleaded. "Please," he sighed, and nodded toward the door. "Make it quick." She stepped in, voice trembling. "I didn't think it would get this far. I didn't think you'd really go through with everything." "That's the problem," he said evenly. "You never thought past your own desires." "But the girls," she stammered. "They need their mother." Daniel stood, slowly walking toward her. "They need a mother who doesn't lie, who doesn't sneak around while they sleep in the next room, who doesn't pretend everything is perfect while tearing our family apart from the inside." She reached for his hand, but he stepped back. "You already made your choice, Melissa. You just didn't expect consequences." Her voice cracked. "So that's it? You're just going to erase me from their lives?" "No," he said firmly. "But I'm going to protect them from ever thinking this kind of betrayal is normal." Tears streamed down her face. "You're punishing me." "No," he said softly. "I'm teaching our daughters what self-respect looks like." As she stood there, shattered in the silence, Daniel picked up a folder from his desk. The final custody motion. "I'll see you in court," he said, then opened the door, motioning her to leave. Melissa walked out, numb, her world slipping away one piece at a time. And Daniel, for the first time in months, felt the weight on his chest begin to lift. He was no longer the betrayed husband. He was a father fighting for peace, and he wasn't stopping until he won it. The courtroom was cold, but Daniel's resolve was colder. He sat upright, eyes fixed ahead, while Melissa sat 2 rows behind her lawyer, nervously tapping her manicured fingers against her skirt. Today was the final custody hearing. The day the judge would decide whether their twin daughters would stay with the man who had built their lives around stability, or the woman who had shattered it in secrecy. Melissa had tried everything to salvage her image. Therapy sessions, community involvement, even a public apology letter she'd submitted through her lawyer. But Daniel had come prepared. Weeks earlier, he had handed over a full report to the court. Private investigator footage, voice recordings, text exchanges, undeniable proof that her affair hadn't just been a mistake, it had been a pattern of deception. He also included evidence of her neglect, leaving the kids alone at home during her trysts with Brandon. As the judge reviewed the evidence, the silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Melissa's face turned pale when the photos were passed forward. Images of her laughing in hotel bars, kissing Brandon in the car, sneaking out of motels while the girls were home asleep. She kept her head down, avoiding Daniel's gaze, but he never looked away. He wanted her to feel every ounce of truth she had tried to hide. When it was his turn to speak, Daniel stood and walked to the front. His voice was steady, clear. "Your Honor, this isn't about revenge. It's about protection. My daughters deserve a home built on trust, not lies. They deserve to grow up watching love, not betrayal. I'm not asking to erase their mother. I'm asking to shield them from the damage her choices have caused." Melissa shifted in her seat, her breathing uneven. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't hear it. Her ears were ringing, her stomach tight with panic. She knew the judge, saw through her polished facade. After deliberation, the judge returned. Given the weight of evidence and the consistency of Mr. Carter's character throughout these proceedings, the court grants Daniel Carter full physical and legal custody. Mrs. Carter will retain supervised visitation pending further review. Melissa gasped quietly, eyes wide with disbelief. Her world, once carefully curated with lies, had finally collapsed in front of everyone. As Daniel stepped outside into the warm afternoon sun, he felt a rush of relief. Not victory, because no one wins in betrayal, but peace. For the first time in months, he could breathe freely, knowing his daughters were safe, knowing the truth had triumphed over illusion. He didn't look back when Melissa walked out behind him. There was nothing left to say, only a future to build, one rooted in honesty, strength, and love that would never need to be hidden in the shadows. After months of deception, betrayal, and emotional turmoil, Daniel finally reclaimed control over his life. What began as a devastating discovery of his wife Melissa's infidelity spiraled into an unraveling of secrets far deeper than he could have imagined. With unshakable determination, Daniel transformed his pain into strength, exposing the truth through undeniable evidence and dismantling the lies that had poisoned his family. In the end, he stood tall, not as a broken husband, but as a father, who chose dignity over destruction, justice over bitterness. He protected his daughters, secured their future, and walked away from the wreckage with his integrity intact. Melissa lost everything: her marriage, her children, her reputation, because of her own choices. But Daniel emerged wiser, stronger, and more aware of the value of trust and self-respect. The lesson is clear: never ignore your intuition and never underestimate the power of truth. Betrayal may shatter your world, but it also reveals who truly deserves a place in it. In life, we must learn to protect our peace, set boundaries, and stand firm in the face of manipulation. Healing begins the moment we choose ourselves, and that choice can rebuild everything we've lost.